trial. Then he withdrew from them about a stone's throw away, knelt down and prayed, "Father, if you are willing, remove this cup from me. Yet not my will, but yours be done." Then an angel from heaven appeared to him and gave him strength. In his anguish he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat became like big drops of blood falling down on the ground. When he got up from prayer, he came to the disciples and found them sleeping because of grief. And he said to them, "Why are you sleeping? Get up and pray, that you may not come into the time of trial." This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. You may be seated. So in this series, we've been collecting your sermon questions on the connection card, and I love the one that asked about the whole point of marriage. And being limited in my own experience, being male, 60, married for 35 years, I thought I'd invite soon-to-be married and budding preacher Mackenzie Farrell to do the sermon with me. And we met a couple times to plan, and then her basement flooded this week, and she didn't have time to prepare, and she had to figure out what, so she's not here today. But I have the benefit of some of her insights and some of our discussions, so I will share those. Including the fact that being a millennial, she knows how to do these newfangled survey monkeys and all of that. So she did one of those for us, which was really fascinating. But before we look at that in a moment, I want to ask you, whether you're married or have a partner or not either, what is the point of marriage? Just think in your own head. Come first thing in your mind, what is the point of marriage? Here's what 41 people, Christian, Jewish, secular, young, old, gay, straight, said in Mackenzie's survey, so I picked out 6 of my favorite. What is the point of marriage? Tax reductions. I think it was a young person. I think they meant deductions. Unifying 2 soulmates, right? We hear that a lot. This must have been a guy. To have consistent sex with the person you find most compatible. Just a guess. 4th, to glorify God. Probably a Christian, right? This was interesting. As a 40-year gay couple, marriage didn't change us. It changed how others viewed us. Interesting. And then the last one. I don't plan on getting married. I think it's a vestige of misogyny and men owning women. Okay, there you go. All sorts of views, right, from Mackenzie's Facebook page and from mine. So then, what does the Bible say about marriage? Here, again, it's the last time I'll mention her, but we were having a discussion about what Bible verses to use, what scripture. I was more inclined to something that was more standard about marriage, like Ephesians 5 or whatever, but she was taken by this Garden of Gethsemane, not my will, but your will be done story, because it was becoming helpful for her as she thought about her relationship with James and the marriage discussions that they had. So I thought, okay, that sounds interesting. Let's do that. And I'm glad we did. Because on the face, this passage has nothing to do with marriage. But from the other standpoint, it has everything to do with marriage. And let me say how I see that. Jesus and the Father are one from eternity past. And yet, Jesus gets to this point in the Garden of Gethsemane just hours before he goes to the cross, and he has this tremendously human, intense moment where he struggles to submit his will to the one with whom he has always been one from the beginning of time and before time. Not my will, but your will be done, right? And isn't that a lot like our most intimate relationships with marriage or partners, whatever, where we felt a soul connection, and that's what started everything out, so we felt like we've been one, we've been meant for each other since we were children, or whatever we say and do, and yet there are always those times when we struggle to live out that original soul connection we felt. That's marriage. Jesus, God's 2-in-1, becomes a reflection of our struggle to be 2-in-1. So, marriage is hard work because I'll use the word surrender. I think that's best tied to the Garden of Gethsemane passage. You could use the word submit, you could use the word serve, because marriage is about surrendering to another person, not just my will, but your will be done. We might add too. I remember in my own marriage that when we were first dating and we were still googly eyes, and I just thought the soul connection would be like a snap forever. And then we were about 6 months or so into our marriage, and I remember sitting on the kind of dirtyish blue-gray shag carpet of our graduate school apartment bathroom and thinking, we're never going to make it. We are never going to make it. This whole marriage idea was a mistake. I'm going to be the first one in my family to be divorced. We're never going to make it. And that was probably in 35 years the lowest I ever felt. And that was just 6 months after wedded bliss had begun, right? And you can add your stories where you felt that in your most intimate and closest relationships. I never expected, I think, to drink a cup of suffering in my marriage. I thought it'd all be a pale ale of joy. And it wasn't. Surrender is tough. So that's the one side we see here in the Garden of Gethsemane story. The other side is that they were always one. Right? They were always soul connected, Jesus and the Father. And that, we could think simply that surrender or submission leads to greater oneness. Well, it probably does, usually. But we could also think about that intimacy, that soul connection gives us strength to surrender. It goes both ways. If I were going to graph it, I would talk about it as a mutually reinforcing, I'm not sure where it starts or where it ends, but it reinforces each other like a virtuous cycle of surrender and soul connections. You know how that works, right? You know that there was a point in your closest relationship where you had to decide whether you were going to be all about your needs or whether you were going to work on meeting each other's needs, right? When I was married, at first I was probably in love with the feeling of being loved, right? It was about me. And gradually I had to decide, do I meet her needs too? So in our relationship, it had to do, okay, graduate school is done. I have my first church up in Sussex County in Montague. And, to succeed there, I feel like I got to spend more and more nights out, 4 or 5 nights out, counseling people, working on committees, visiting a new person, whatever it is. And at some point I had to realize I was just serving me. I was just serving my need to be successful in my first job. And then if I really cared about her, that there'd be more nights at home. There'd be more boundaries put up at work. There would be more times that we would carve out of crazy busy schedules trying to prove ourselves in our first careers to feed each other. And then I found that when I did that, I got to watch the Lions game on Sunday afternoon. Or whatever it was. That if I serve or submit, that the other serves or submit, and it goes from a selfish cycle to a virtuous cycle together. You've worked on that and done that too. And that's exactly what we see with Jesus. That even though he was one, he still had to surrender and submit, do the hard work, and that when he surrendered and submitted, to the point of, Luke, the physician says, sweat drops of blood, which the medical research tells me that that's only under intense, stressful situations does one do that, so that was how stressed Jesus felt. That then an angel appeared to him and gave him strength. surrender and soul intimacy. He has this great experience. It gives him strength and carries him on to the cross. And again, moving from that selfish, vicious cycle to that virtuous surrender cycle. Oh, went too far. There we go. Leave it there. What I find in marriage counseling, and let's just back up from that a moment. Let me just say that surrender and submission and serving each other is not about abusive relationships. Right? If you're being abused physically, emotionally, spiritually, you don't need to surrender and submit one more time. You need to leave, right? And you need help to do that. But most of our relationships are healthy enough that the surrender soulmate virtuous cycle, mutually reinforcing, is important. And I find that usually the surrender happens or it doesn't happen in the small things. Sort of reminds me of the story of the guy who walked across America from east to west. I forget where he started, east or west, but wherever. When he ended up, there was a reporter there to meet him and ask the question, what was the hardest thing in your 3,000-mile trek? And the reporter's expecting, driving rainstorms, or snow in the Rockies, or speeding 80-mile-an-hour semi-trucks when he had to walk on the side of the highway, whatever. And the guy said, no, none of those things. The hardest thing was sand in my shoes. Think about that. What trips up most intimate relationships? It's sand in the shoes. What I tell the 100 and some couples that I work with, the illustration I use is toothpaste in the Burster household. We had stupid arguments about the right way of squeezing toothpaste, right? You've had some of these. My wife is logical. She says, well, you squeeze from the bottom. Sure, that makes sense. My logic was, no, you squeeze from the middle, and at the end you squeeze from the bottom because you grab it in the middle. I think equally logical. She didn't. And we went around and around on this stupid little sand in your shoes thing until finally, all the 15, 16 years we lived in Branchburg, we had separate toothpaste. So I could squeeze from the middle and she could squeeze from the bottom. So if we split up anytime in the near future, it's because we went back to one toothpaste. Right? But it's the sand in the shoes. So, what does Jesus teach us in the Garden of Gethsemane? That when you say, first to God, not my will, but yours be done, and then to a partner, not my will always, but your will be done sometimes, that you're emptying the sand in your shoes. You're turning your will over. You're pouring out those small little irritants that build up. And that, it seems to me, is the key to most normal, healthy relationships. So, if I were to put it in one sentence, what is marriage about? Based on this story, I would say one answer is marriage is about following Jesus and his relationship to the Father to allow our surrender to enhance our soul connection and vice versa with our partner. You might have a better or different answer based on what you were thinking. But here's the question. What is Jesus asking each of us to work on in those closest relationships that we have? Let's pray. Jesus, you showed us what it was like to reflect this intimate, infinite connection, soul connection you had with God our parent from the very beginning. And you showed us what it was like to, in the hardest of times, to surrender again. And we ask that whatever it is you need us to focus on, whatever it is you need to do in our lives to make our closest relationships more, thrive more, that you will do it. And you will do it in my life, not in the other's life. And that you will receive praise and honor and glory for it. It's in your name we pray. And all God's people say.